Hunters, welcome back to Why It's Great. This is part 2 of my video. In the previous part, I talked about Scrooge and Night Bitch, and I talked about the episode of Smallville. This is part 2 where I'm talking about The Substance. The reason this is in 2 parts is because thematically I feel that Night Bitch and those other movies, they do have something in common with The Substance, which is all of these movies have meaning and value. And I'm just going to continue my thoughts here. Here's my review for The Substance. Okay, The Substance. We've finally gotten here. Thank you for sitting through everything up to this point. This is a really compacted episode because I had a lot of movies I wanted to talk about. And I didn't want to just make a bunch of 20-minute episodes. I really felt like there is something that strings all of these movies together, and it's that they all have a very specific reason for being made. Each one of these movies has a theme. Each one of these movies has something to say, and they say it exceptionally well. So in the case of The Substance, I'm actually very glad I was there was an original second half to this video where I was passing out because I was just so tired because I'm an idiot. And I didn't sleep. But I'm glad because I was driving, talking to my roommate because we had watched Night Bitch and we watched The Substance. And the subject came up. It was just like, what the hell was that about? What the hell was The Substance about? And, and I was like, well, it's about the same thing that Night Bitch is about, except it's amplified because it's about a person who's actually making the movies and entertainment that the public is enjoying. So it's an amplified, incredibly dramatized version of the same thing. For those of you who haven't seen The Substance, here's just a little rollout. This is going to be a spoiler review, but for those of you who haven't seen it, I do recommend it. But it is a bit of a body horror movie. So if you haven't seen The Fly, I recommend seeing The Fly. And The Substance was such a popular movie based on my own algorithm. I just kept seeing videos and stories about it, and it was just the hype. The hype is real, but the hype was also almost too much for me. I almost didn't want to watch it based on how much it was hyped up. But I think it's the kind of movie people were craving, especially after Joker Folie à Deux. I think people were craving a weird movie, but people want their blood and guts too. And that's not what Joker Folie à Deux was about. And then they got that in spades with The Substance. So The Substance is a body horror picture about an aging star, Demi Moore, who she still looks fantastic, by the way. But she's no longer a spring chicken, and she's about to lose her job for that exact reason. Because even though she's making a show about working out, and you see she's got the strength, she's got the flexibility, everything about her is still top notch. It's just that she's not 25 anymore. That's the only thing. That's the only thing that the producers aren't happy with, or the shareholders, is that she's not 25 anymore. And they want someone younger. So she's about to lose her job for that. And so an offer is made to her to take a substance that will make her younger again. But there's a trade. It won't make her young forever. It will only make her young for 7 days out of the week. So it's a bit of a fucked up Cinderella story in a way, because it's the Cinderella story about success. And the prince is not a prince. He's a pervert producer, played by Dennis Quaid. And I think this is, talk about best performances. I've grown up with Dennis Quaid as Dragonheart, as the hero of Dragonhearts, and movies like that, or Flight of the Phoenix, or I've just seen him, or the Day After Tomorrow. I've seen him in so many movies as the kind of somewhat grumpy, somewhat reluctant hero, but he is a hero. So I've just grown up with that. Or even Frequency. I love Frequency. That's probably my favorite Dennis Quaid movie of that time period. Frequency and Dragonheart, without question. Top Dennis Quaid movies. But I've grown up with him, like looking at him as kind of this heroic figure. And in this movie, he just plays this subtly, secretly perverse producer who, when we meet him, he's eating food, and we get all these close-ups of him eating these I forget what kind of fish it is. It's some kind of seafood, but it's the kind you gotta break open. I'm sorry, I forget. I know it's just such a dumb thing to forget, but he's eating it, and we're getting all these close-ups, and his mouth is so greasy, and he just looks disgusting eating this food, and he's talking while he's eating. For those with that dinner table etiquette, you're not supposed to talk with your mouth full of food. It's considered rude. So that's for again, going back to that domestic talk, right? So this is everything he's doing. He's being very rude, disgusting, and he's trying to justify to Demi Moore why she's losing her job. It's just, hey, it's the shareholders. They just want someone younger. Because you're there's someone I know. Goodbye. And leaves her with the bill. God, he's really gross in this movie. And then you see her after she takes the substance, and she becomes young, beautiful Margaret Qualley, who again, Drive Away Dolls, fun movies, a little Coen. It is a Coen brother movie, isn't it? But just one Coen. One Uno Coen, but really good movie. That's the movie where I learned her name, because I'd seen her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I think I'd seen her maybe in something else. I'm not sure, but definitely that was my introduction to her, or at least my known introduction to her was that movie. And then Drive Away Dolls was like, I learned her name. I'm like, oh man, she was fantastic in that. But in this movie, yeah, Demi Moore and her two-hand this singular role so well. But when you see her as Margaret Qualley, and Dennis Quaid is completely different. He's not eating grossly in front of her, but he's still very imposing and creepy. And again, it's we're talking about, what is the movie about? Why is this movie the way that it is? And it's right there. It's right there in the beginning of the movie, what the movie is about. That there's this image in the movie after or before Demi Moore has this scene when we're first introduced to her doing her show, where she leaves the studio, and there's a very long hallway to, I guess, the other offices or getting out the door, because a studio is just a warehouse with a studio inside of it. So it's a really big building. So there's a lot of long hallways. And so she's going down this long hallway, and it's full of all of these posters of her, I guess, across time. And the movie starts off actually with this very beautiful image of this really cool beginning I didn't expect, where you actually see a star made on Hollywood Boulevard. It's a great montage. It's very symbolic of everything that's coming. It's a great piece of cinema, a great piece of filmmaking, because we're just fixed on that star getting made. And then after it gets made, we see it over time, how at first it's beautiful, and then slowly it's cracked. And at first people are taking photos with it, and then suddenly people are just walking over it. It's just one more thing on the street. And there's one final image I'll save for the spoilers, but it's, this is what cinema is for. Cinema is both for movies like Night Bitch, which I feel like very relatable movies. Even the style of the storytelling, it's not going too extreme. It's just telling the story. I think kind of like in the vein of like Little Miss Sunshine, kind of just that relatable type of filmmaking that's telling the story in a very pure, straightforward way. Whereas then we get to this movie where the filmmaker takes the movie and is showing you something. You know what I mean? I think there's two different ways of making movies. Because a director, there's a reason why directors are considered the primary storytellers. It's because they're the ones telling the camera operators what to film. And so there's a different way. Every single director is going to have a different way of making the same scene. When I was going to Academy of Art, that was literally the first lesson in my first directing class. Tim Boxall, whose work I still need to see. Sorry, Tim, I'm the shittiest student. But that was the funny thing about going to a school full of professionals. Most of them say, you don't gotta watch my movies. I'm like, what do you mean I don't gotta watch your movies? You're my teacher, aren't you? But he was like that too. But it's like these people with real credits in real movies and shows or television movies who are, I guess they didn't make what they wanted to make. I don't know. I don't really know. A lot of them just have too many stories with shitty producers who took over their story, or on the back end changed the editing because they didn't like the movie they were making. So many horror stories where the filmmaker didn't get to do what they wanted to do. But you see their film knowledge and their film love is so pure and so true that they could teach this stuff like they were sleeping, in their sleep. Which essentially Tim Boxall said, it's like, everything I need to teach you about directing, I'm going to teach you in this first class, and after that you don't need to show up. Which I thought was amazing, and he meant it, and he was right. And he was like, after this point, just make your stuff. You have 3 assignments, make your videos and bring in your progress, and we'll talk about it. And that was, and everything he said was true, because on the first day everyone got the same script and we were all told to direct it how we would direct it. And I did the scene my way. Every other student did the scene their own way. Actually, I think it was 3 different scenes. But it really showed you how everyone has a different perspective when they're directing. And so this movie is really that opening image of just seeing how the star is made is parabolic for how the rest of the movie will be made, where everything is really seen through Demi Moore's perspective. And so while it begins with her walking down a hallway completely full of her posters, it's full of her posters. It's symbolic of a lifetime. She's not even old yet. She's what, 50s maybe? I don't even know. Either late 40s or 50s. I don't actually know. She still looks fantastic to me. But again, that's the subjective, right? That's the subjective. Yes, to me, she looks fantastic. But to this world, to the world that she's in, to this very superficial, bottom feeder society that's not very intelligent, but it's all about what makes that money, which is the bottom line. She's old, she's not the spring chicken. And old men just want to look at little pretty girls, and it's very creepy. So when we see her take the substance and become the young version of herself, now Dennis Quaid's not so creepy, but he also is imposing and creepy. And yet the weird thing is, even though she knows how Dennis Quaid really looks and what he's really after, even though she knows it, she also knows that this is kind of the truth of the career she's in, where this is how she's going to be treated. If she goes somewhere else, she's going to be treated the same by other creepy producers. And so when she's Margaret Qualley and Dennis Quaid, and there's a deal with the substance where, like I said, you're only going to look this way for a certain amount of time. So she has to explain to him, well, I'm only free at certain times. And he very creepily, imposingly says, well, then we're going to work around whatever sick puppy or mom that you need. It's so much, and it's so creepy, you know what I mean? Even though she knows how he is, what he really looks like, that to me, he looked like a bridge troll. The grind your bones and for your stew type of thing. To me, that's what he really looked like in that opening scene, which, of course, that's the intention. That's why we're getting all the close-ups of his mouth being gross and all of his behaviors being gross. That's the intention. The filmmaker wants you to feel uncomfortable and wants you to realize that this guy's kind of a disgusting, dishonest person. and it wants you to know it up front because you're only going to see that so clearly with Demi Moore at her current age. And so when she's Margaret Qualley and being treated well, even though she knows what he really looks like, she's just happy to be employed and to have her job back and to keep living her dream. And that's the sad thing, is that she's willing to essentially, and I'm not getting into spoilers yet, but to mutilate herself or to do something extreme to herself to look more attractive to a person who is disgusting and dishonest in the first place. And even though she knows he's disgusting and dishonest, it's whatever she has to do to keep living her dream. And so, like I said, it's a body horror picture. So by the end of the movie, she changes in a way that's very dramatic, and no one could prepare me for it. And what I think is beautiful is that people respect this movie so much that they have tried not to spoil it. I cannot believe it. And yet, even though the comparison to The Fly is a very huge spoiler, it still will not prepare you. Even if I've seen The Fly. I have a lot of love and respect for that movie, but I've only watched it once because the ending. And the same thing with this movie. I still didn't feel like what was going to happen happened, because the movie does a really fantastic job of making sure you don't feel that way. But and actually, this director, I looked her up. It's either her first, I can't remember now, but it's either her first feature or her second feature. She doesn't have as many credits, but without question, the talent and the vision is there. I mean, damn, like, this is a very well crafted movie. I think just the ending on a technical level, I would have done a little bit differently. But I'm just talking literally technique or the way it was done. But what happens is still like worth watching, worth talking about. It's not enough. No normal person would care, obviously. Otherwise, this movie wouldn't be big. It's just a little thing in my own brain. I'll talk about in the spoilers, but again, what is the movie about? And again, keeping the fly ending in mind. She doesn't turn into a fly, don't worry. But and there's literally no way she could. But still, being that even with that preparation, you're not prepared for what happens. What's the movie about? Like, this is my discussion with my roommate, where she wasn't complaining about the movie, but I think it was just a little bit less relatable to her than Night Bitch, which we were both feeling. We were both really feeling it. And I said, well, what's the movie about, right? It's about how you look at actresses, and they get older and they start Botoxing themselves and they start having cosmetic surgery. And although to them they're looking better, to the rest of us, to normal people who do appreciate people as they are, it's like, no, you're looking more grotesque, and we see your puffed up lips. You don't look younger. You just look more plastic. You look more fake. You look more unreal. And I don't mean to say that to make actresses or even male actors are doing this stuff too. But I'm not saying this to make actresses feel uncomfortable about themselves. I wouldn't want that at all. I wouldn't want you to be in that position. I think you do need to become happy with yourself, because here's another personal story. I had a friend in high school, but we were mostly friends during my college years. But he had this fixation about his nose. He felt he had an unattractive nose. And I told him, like, no, it's not unattractive. It's fine. It's just a nose. It's just a normal looking nose to me. But it was like every time we hung out, are they looking at my nose? Do they see my nose? And he eventually did get plastic surgery on his nose. And I'd still, to this day, I would say it looks more like what you want. But I mean, to me, I never really paid attention to your nose. It was not a significant thing to me about how your nose looked, and I'm like, I have a big nose. I'm Samoan. So, he was worried about the size and shape of his nose. And in reality, he had been through some stuff in his younger days. I don't know if I want to talk about it necessarily because maybe in case people see it. But he had been through some stuff where he had come out as gay to his parents, and well, I'll just say that they didn't take it well, and it ended up being a very horrendous experience for him when he came out. And to me, although at the time we were hanging out, you couldn't tell. It seemed like they were a loving family. To me, knowing what he had told me about what happened to him after coming out, I felt that it's kind of obvious. I was like, oh, in my mind, he had compartmentalized all of his insecurities about coming out into his nose. Like, instead of where he could accept for himself that he was gay, but he still had a great insecurity and a great fear. And to me, I felt that all of that fear and insecurity became represented by something on his face that he looked at every day. That's how I felt. At least that's how I felt. Because to me, it's like, it's just a nose, bro. Like, no, literally nobody cares. Like, you know, there's other people with gonzo, weird noses that we do notice, but in his mind, that's was his nose. I'm like, no, it's just a fucking nose, bro. Like, nobody knows or cares. But you know, it's that deep-rooted insecurity where it doesn't really matter even what you hear. And that's how I feel with Demi Moore. Is that it wouldn't matter if she met me. I mean, her character, not the real Demi Moore. I don't know what she really thinks of herself, but if I met this character and I told her, oh God, you're still so beautiful, it's really a pleasure to meet you. But she's living in Hollywood where she's no longer the talked about star and nobody knows who she is anymore. And I feel bad because I want to break into this business, but I know for sure I will meet people if I'm so lucky to follow my dream, that I'll meet people whose work I don't know, and this makes me feel bad about that. Like, fuck, you know what I mean? There's so many people who've done so many things, and some people who are real stars, even if it was only for that 15 minutes, who, you know, it would be worth it to know that they were that, you know? And it's sad seeing her as Demi Moore walk around and be unrecognized by people, because I see her and I still see Ghost, you know, and I know she's done a lot more than that, but Ghost is definitely my favorite Demi Moore movie that I've seen, because I haven't seen G.I. Jane. But you know what I mean? Like, I've always loved Ghosts, and you know, she's still this magical beauty. But you know, based on how Hollywood is, we're always looking for the young star for the young people. You know what I mean? It's not even just a creepy lie, but really young people relate to young people, and that's how they are. It's just how they're wired. So they're looking for someone to tell them how they should be in the next 5 to 10 years. And that's just how people are. That's just how it works. But you know that Dennis Quaid and his shareholders are also perverse, that they're also doing it for a very perverse reason. And they couldn't just have a co-star or something like that. They needed to replace her entirely because they personally wanted to see someone young and see that, you know, flexible body, and get all their glamour shots of the crotch and the ass. And it's really, you know, what is a natural craving for people becomes this very perverse thing in this business, where it's not just a natural thing, but it's a horrible, perverse thing that we become because it benefits us to be so. And so I think the substance is overwhelmingly about how we treat each other and how we treat ourselves for that public perception, or in this case, it's also for her livelihood, for her job. She wants to keep her massive apartment that's on the top of a building where she can see a poster of herself, you know what I mean? And it's a bit vain too. It's a bit vain that she also has a gigantic poster of herself, you know what I mean, in her own apartment. It's like the protection of that vanity. But then when you see how the movie ends, and, you know, like I said, I've already spoiled enough that it's not a happy ending. But she looks at a picture of herself before the movie started, and she misses how she used to look before she took the substance, before she did that cosmetic surgery. She finally appreciates how beautiful she used to be. Um, and it's a real tragedy in that aspect. But trust me, even saying that, it's not going to spoil what you're going to see if you haven't seen the movie. Yeah, just know that those deeper aspects are part of this movie. And so, without spoiling much more than that, I thought The Substance was a really strong piece. Like I said, there was just a little bit at the ending I would have maybe edited differently, maybe used a couple different lines, but that's more of a nitpick. It's by no means like anything I would say that the regular audience member would be really bothered by, because it's such a crazy ending that shouldn't be spoiled, and I don't really think it can be spoiled. I mean, you could say it, but unless you're watching it, it's not even worth saying unless you actually watch it. I think watch it. Oh my God, what an ending! Um, but yeah, so there was spoilers for me, heavy spoilers for me in all those clips that I said the hype, where it was revealed how much references there are to Stanley Kubrick. So for Stanley Kubrick fans, there's and Stanley Kubrick also used a lot of very similar techniques and storytelling devices to sort of have deeper meanings behind every image. So that's totally here. It's totally there. And like I said, if you look at this opening image of Dennis Quaid eating the food, looking disgusting, and symbolically, you could say it's like he is eating her. He's devouring her. Her star power has lessened now, and so for the ratings, he needs a new star. But it's as if that star is still just a human being who is food, who is cannon fodder for a bridge troll. And to me, that's why I realized when I was talking to my roommate, he's a bridge troll. You have to go through the bridge troll to cross the bridge. Except this bridge troll doesn't accept coins or bread. He eats you. So, you have to give some physical part of yourself to cross this bridge. That's the cost of stardom. That's the cost of art. Is it does cost a part of you to make it. And and this is really what it's talking about. It's like the cost of this life. For some people, if they take it that far, that's what it can be. And so it's a real strong picture. But again, the reason why everything's happening, the reason why the story is happening, is because it's a metaphor for how actors, and mostly actresses, again, both movies are about women and how they look at themselves and how the world looks at them, and the push and pull of how much does the world's perspective really matter. And both movies are about these women and how they need to just be happy with themselves at the end of the story. But both movies have dramatically different endings. Night Bitch is much more domestic. Like I said, it's more like Little Miss Sunshine, in the vein of just feeling authentic, feeling like you're there. Just for the normal person who's not a part of the Hollywood machine, which, this is what Nope was about as well, how we just get chewed up. People just get chewed up and spit out by the Hollywood machine, by the Hollywood system, no matter what end they're on. In the case of Nope, it's just the fucking horse wrangler. Even the horse wrangler is a part of the system where he's a specialist in horses, and even his horse gets replaced by a digital character. You know what I mean? Because that's just cheaper and easier to deal with than the real horse. And so, we are all going through it on some aspect. But in the case of Demi Moore, when it's you, there's no respect for who you are from the people that surround you. Again, it's about the environment, right? So the beautiful thing about Night Bitch is because it's domestic, because it's more relatable, and she's around, regular people, she can find regular people who relate to her. But in the case of Demi Moore, she's not around those people. She's around the sharks. She's around the bridge trolls. That's her environment. And that's what she judges herself on, is the environment that she's in. So there's no Pete Ross to appreciate her for her how she is. There's just the bridge trolls. And the one guy who talks to her on the street doesn't even know who she is. And it's, and yeah. So I think the substance has a lot of substance. I mean, this is why I made Why It's Great, to really celebrate that there's movies out there that have deeper meanings, deeper values. It's about more than just, did I like it? Did I like the movie? Did it fit my political feelings? You know, it's just, this is what the movie, as far as I could tell, what was it about, and the value that it has, which is it's really a cautionary tale about how you need to learn to appreciate yourself. Now, that being said, let me get into some spoilers. Please, if you have not seen the movie, do not watch further than this, because I'm spoiling key parts of the story that you might really want to not know about. So please stop watching here. And if you like this review, please give me a like. That'd be cool. But even that, I don't care. If you're liking this review and you want to see more, please stop here, watch the movie, and think for yourself. Please think for yourself. Don't take this as a reason to like the movie if you're not liking the movie. But please go see the movie yourself and then come back, and then you can watch this part and see if you agree with any of my further thoughts. Not that that really matters. You got to think for yourself anyway. But more for the purposes of discussion. So if you want to discuss with me about the movie in the comments, I'm totally open to that. Yeah. So spoilers from here on out. There's a little through line to this movie that I really appreciated, because again, it was a bit of a reflection of myself, where Demi Moore runs into this guy who, at first she thinks it's a fan, and she's so elated to be recognized because nobody recognizes her anymore. And it's not a fan. It is a fan, but it's a guy she knew in high school. But it is the patheticness of it. It's, hey, and it's this kind of older looking dude. He's losing his hair, and he's a bit of a dork and a weirdo. But he's like, don't you recognize me? I was in your 10th grade homeroom. It's like he's not even in a normal class, not even like English or math class or art class. It was a homeroom class where no one even talks to each other anyway. So he's been obsessed with her since this homeroom, and he is a big fan. But he's so bad that he writes down her number on a piece of paper. It falls into the gross water and becomes brown, and he still gives it to her. Like, oh, this dude is so many, red flags just there. Like, dude, come on, that's gross. Don't give that to a woman. What's wrong with you? And you think the homeroom is going to be impressive to her? I don't think so. It's a bit creepy. But, what's not creepy is he does come off as genuine. He does genuinely want to see her. He's like, hey, maybe we could get a drink and catch up. And obviously he's still attracted to her and interested in her, but he's genuinely attracted to her and interested in her. So even though there's some icks and some red flags, there's also like, hey, he means it. He does mean what he's saying. And he's not a bridge troll. He's just a normal guy. You know what I mean? For whatever that is worth. And so when she first starts turning herself into Margaret Qualley, and there's a moment where the younger self, so here's the body horror stuff. I did not expect for her to rip out of her own body. Oh my God. You know what I mean? Like, and luckily we don't see it the first time, not all the way. So the movie really did a great job. I really feel like up until the final explosive ending, I felt that this movie was perfectly cut, perfectly cast, perfectly directed, where everything felt natural enough and real enough that I really felt like I was there. It was just the final fly sequence, and a particular part of it I'll get to later, that just rubbed me the wrong way, as I didn't feel like it was as natural as the rest of the movie, as goofy as certain parts of it were. But it's so sad when her you're only supposed to be this character, this alternate self, for 7 days, and it's a body that pops out of her. But unlike Avatar or whatever, you don't exist in both bodies at the same time, which I don't know why. It doesn't really make sense once you start asking questions, but that's not really the point. The point is not for it to make sense. The point is, this is a horrific thing to do to yourself for the sake of fame and all that. Like, it's genuinely horrific to do to yourself for the cost of fame and lifestyle and vanity. Genuinely terrible thing to do to yourself. It's terrible to do to yourself, but you're still doing it. But there's a point where her younger self just takes a couple extra hours, not even a full day. And it comes at the cost of Demi Moore's body starts to age faster. And she has it's just her finger, but it's a sign that, things are not going to go well. And then this happens one more time, and then her foot starts to age. And then at that point, she starts thinking about calling that guy, because she knows that she's in an environment that doesn't appreciate or value her in any way, shape, or form. But this guy genuinely wants to see her, and she wants that. She discovers in that moment that she does want, just even though the dude's a bit of a dork, at least he genuinely means what he's saying, and he's not just doing it because you're hot or you're the hot thing of the moment. It's like she actually wants to just be appreciated for who she is. But she only discovers that once her body starts to truly fall apart. That maybe there's something a little bit more valuable than vanity and fame and crazy lifestyles. Because all of that costs a lot to have. It costs far more than, even as expensive as houses are now, it costs far more than that. And then you see, and the movie's really about that real cost. So it's really sad when she's getting ready for her date, but still she's so deeply insecure with herself that she starts, even though it's just some dorky guy, she starts putting on makeup. And then she puts on more makeup. And then she gets really crazy and then turns herself into her younger self and then forgets about that guy. And it's just like, damn, you know what I mean? Like, the cost is yourself. And it's just, what a tragedy, because it's a small storyline that says a lot. So now this is when the real spoiler here. Okay, the ending of this movie. Okay, this is the real spoiler. If you have not seen the movie, stop watching now, watch it, come back for this part, because this is probably the part we're going to talk about. And if you want to leave comments about this ending, please put spoiler at the top of your comment, just so anyone, if there are people who read the comments, can know, hey, don't read further if you haven't seen the movie, because I do believe every movie deserves its chance to be seen with fresh eyes from whoever is lucky enough to watch that movie, so people can think for themselves. Very wise lesson from my father. He always, every time I asked him who should I vote for, he said, think for yourself. He didn't try to tell me what to think. And I think that's a valuable thing for life as well as movies, because I love movies. I do think you should think for yourself. You shouldn't take my analysis and go watch this movie and then say, oh, well, pretentiously, it's all about the thing in your life. And if you don't see those things or relate to those things, it's not my job to tell you to do that. You got to think for yourself and decide for yourself whether you like it or not. But that being said, I'm talking about the ending of this movie. These are my thoughts. You don't need to share them, and I don't want you to share them. This is how I feel. So when we get to the end of this movie and she has wasted herself, her regular body has gone completely old, and now her young body is starting to fall apart. And then she decides to take the substance one more time, which, again, the instructions say not to do. Even the instructions tell her not to do this. And she becomes that thing. She becomes the thing. It is so horrifying to look at. Oh my God, it's still in my head. And the sad part is, she literally looks like the melty guy from the ending of RoboCop, except that You see the Demi Moore face on her back with another arm. And it literally looks like Demi Moore herself is screaming to be free and to be let out. And it's so sad when the real Demi Moore becomes this old, decrepit thing with a massive back. And it's fucking, that by itself was frightening. And then she takes the substance again from the Margaret Qualley body, this completely separate body, and then the thing that becomes is the actual thing. There's a lot of cinema love in this movie. The love for the love for Stanley Kubrick is almost overwhelming, because I mean, those ironically those are the only movies I've really paid attention to or love myself. I love 2001 and I love The Shining, and those are really the only movies of his that I rewatch over and over and over again. Even though I've seen Doctor Strangelove and I still haven't seen Barry Lyndon or Eyes Wide Shut. But even though, you know, Doctor Strangelove was okay for me, but even though there was that, and even though without question Clockwork Orange is great, I only rewatch 2001 and The Shining. So every time I watch those movies, or every time there's a podcast about those movies, I love hearing what people think about them. To me, those movies are just so perfect, so flawless. And so this movie makes a lot of references to those. I found it almost a bit overwhelming, just because I know where it's coming from. I think the regular audience member or people who haven't seen those movies aren't really going to catch it. But God, this grotesque ending, I was like, oh, and you love John Carpenter. Clearly you love John Carpenter, and you love The Fly. You love Cronenberg, because you have gone this far. Oh, it's so terrifying and grotesque to look at. But that is where the meaning is. And this, what I appreciate both about Night Bitch and about this movie, is that they really push their themes and their genre. They push it as far as it can possibly go for the means of telling their story and to tell the meaning behind the story. We're not just seeing this grotesque thing because the filmmaker wants to exploit Demi Moore's time and wants to exploit the audience's need for something extreme. We're seeing this because that's the point. That is the point. That this is the path that you go down when you choose plastic surgery and you do all this stuff. That is why we're having such a crazy backlash of eating healthy, working out, of mental health care. That's why we're having, this is really coming from the public, is because we've seen the cost of this fake lifestyle of fast food, of surgery. We're seeing that all this stuff that was popularized in the 80s, this selfish me thing, is ultimately so self-destructive that, again, when someone Botoxes themselves, the regular person does not see a more attractive person. They see something that looks grotesque and unnatural. And that's even what I felt as a young man growing up. Was like, I did not like fake boobs because they were clearly balloons shoved into women's breasts. I'm like, I don't care if your breast isn't, And again, I think it's your environment, right? If you're only surrounded by people who care if your boobs are the biggest thing on earth, find a better environment to be around. Because that's the key to your happiness, is that you are not a plant rooted into the earth. You can pick your soil. And if you're in a dirty, foul soil filled with bridge trolls, you can leave that because you got legs, and you can walk away, or at the very least, if you're in a wheelchair, you got an Uber. You can call a disabled Uber or something. There's something out there for you. Get on the bus. Get out of that environment. Because for me personally, I think it was Dave Chappelle, or there was some comedian who had said this, and it was both a truth and a joke at the same time. And I think for me, that's what I find most funny. But like, I don't care if you have big breasts, as long as there's something there for me to grab, it's cool. Yeah, I don't care if it's a little boobie, it's fine. As long as I can grab it. You know what I mean? And so when I see the Botox, I'm like, please don't do that to yourself. Like yes, you're older, but that doesn't mean you're ugly. You're just older. This just happens. I mean, wouldn't you rather just be a cute old person than a fucking hey, I'm dead, I can't eat food, my mouth is dead. You know what I mean? So I think the whole point is, this is the cost of doing this to yourself, is that you become so deformed, you're unrecognizable, that you're truly unattractive to people, even on a basic level. Is that, don't do this to yourself, you know? And it's the sad truth is that so many people have already done this to themselves. And we've seen this with the controversy of certain actresses in recent times, and I'm not going to judge, you know, if that's really, going back to my friend, he did eventually get a surgery on his nose, and I mean, I still to this day can't tell you that it looks better, but I'm glad it makes him happy, you know. At least he got rid of that little ridge that he had, and he feels better about it now. But it was just one tiny little bump on his nose was what he was so insecure about. And I just didn't want him to get surgery because I was worried something might happen, you know. But fortunately, everything worked out. And as far as I could tell, he's okay. But I just, you know, again, like the Botox, I don't want some weird thing to happen where, oh, the silicone in my nose burst. I don't know how this stuff works. But luckily, it was just a little bone shaving, and he was fine. I'm like, okay, good. But to that end, it's like, you know, you see so many horror stories of people who go to cosmetic surgery, and, you know, they go somewhere because it's cheaper or whatever, and it all ends horrifically. And sadly, there's so many actresses and models or whatever who've gone through this, and again, they are the troll's food. They have been chewed up and spit out by the system, and rather than finding a better environment, they did this to themselves in the hopes of staying with this environment that's not good for them. And that's the real tragedy, is that at the end, everyone just thinks you're grotesque anyway. You know what I mean? So it doesn't actually help you, but you keep doing it because you think, oh, one of these days, one of these surgeries will work out and I'll get more attractive. You know what I mean? It's like, look, we you know, you get older, it's fine. You know, there's nothing wrong with it. You know, and there's people with genuine conditions that, you know, most people would not react well to. And even in that case, I'm like, you know what? I mean, hey, if you didn't do it to yourself, then I definitely, yeah, no judgment, you know, or I do my best not to judge you. Because look, I'm fat and I did this to myself, and I feel grotesque. You know what I mean? In my case, it's not vanity that made me fat; it's gluttony, and I feel like a grotesque monster. But getting into this fucking ending, okay? We get that Stanley Kubrick 2001 dun dun dun, and the terrible thing is she knows she's a grotesque monster. That's not good for anyone to look at, because I mean, she really is a fucking The Thing monster. That she cuts out a picture of her face and puts it on her face exactly like Deadpool. That was the first thing I thought, oh, that's how Deadpool is. And even Deadpool is not that bad. You know what I mean? Like, even Deadpool is not that bad. He does not need Hugh Jackman's face. It's just, yeah, you just need to calibrate yourself. Okay, that's what he looks like. Okay. But no, she looks like the fucking Thing meets the Fly. And good God. But you know, it's so bad that she knows it, and she puts on her face of the Demi Moore face. You know what I mean? And that's what the point of this story is, that, you know, she ended up recognizing her own beauty when it was too late to go back to it, because these things were irreversible. And but not only that, we get the dun dun dun. She somehow gets onto the stage where she's supposed to perform, and you know, and you see all the dancers around her who are frozen, waiting for her to start dancing, realizing, what is that? That's not a person. That's not a normal looking person. And then the face falls off, and here's where I feel it should have been a little bit different. At first, there's complete silence, and I think they hang on the silence just a little bit too long. And then women get up and start screaming, and it feels a little bit like a cheesy horror movie, because of the way they all scream the exact identical way. And then all of a sudden, men start jumping up saying, "Freak! Monster!" And I just thought it was a little bit unnatural, you know what I mean? But at the same time, before this happens, before Margaret Qualley does this to herself, her teeth have started falling out, and it's that scene from the trailer. Smile, you know, and he's there with the. It's in the trailer. You don't know who these guys are, but in the scene, he announces, "Hey, these are the shareholders, and it's Dennis Quaid, and he is the youngest man, surrounded by a bunch and tallest man, surrounded by a bunch of shorter men who are all old and balding, but they're all wearing suits." And they're all so excited to see her, and they all look kind of like clones of each other. You know what I mean? I think that's a visual metaphor as well. They all look the same. They all look like little clones of each other. And smile, and so she smiles, and everyone else is like, hee. And then they all run off down the hall, and there's a lot of long hallway shots, and they all are happy that she smiled. And then Dennis Quaid leads the troop back down the hall to the auditorium. And you see them all run kind of and hop in an identical kid-like way where it really, really look like little clones of each other. And this is who you're trying to impress. A bunch of perverted little elf clones. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so stupid. You know, it's so ridiculous that's who you're trying to impress to maintain your star on the Walk of Fame. You know, and it's ridiculous. It's like a joke. It's a joke within a joke, within a pile of puke. It's terrible, but we nonetheless get to our ending, and they start saying "freak." I think I would have just liked a little moment of someone saying, "What the fuck is that?" Even if it was just mouth, just a little moment of build up to "freak monster," because it kind of just explodes into this like nightmare of, you don't even know if this is really happening or not. You know what I mean? Like, in terms, you know, obviously it's a movie, but is this happening inside her mind, or is this really happening? Freak monster, and people start attacking her before she does anything. But I would have liked, because the whole movie up until this point is naturalistic to a point. Even though Dennis Quaid is a bit of a cartoon character, and all of his little clone shareholder men are a bunch of little cartoon characters. They look like the dark version of Snow White's elf people, elf friends, whatever the fuck they are. You know what I mean? Even though that's a bit cartoonish, it still feels a bit natural to this world. But once they start screaming "freak" and "monster," it feels like we're in some kind of bizarre Asian movie, like the fear of the social thought. Oh, people think I'm a freak. It just feels like we're in a somewhat different movie. I just would have liked a little bit more of a ramp up to, "You're a freak, you're a monster." You know what I mean? Just a little bit. Turn the volume up on that, as opposed to 0 to 50. Because and something where she maybe backs up and touches some people and they react and freak out. You know. Whereas opposed to everyone just screams and runs away all of a sudden. I just felt it was a bit, this is the only sequence I felt was a bit unnatural. Maybe just because it was such a big sequence and they had to shoot so much, because it really is like the big sequence of the movie. And then they literally like come up and attack her and start delimbing her, and she starts spraying the entire place in blood, and it becomes Carrie. You know what I mean? It's literally the Carrie scene. I'm like, wow, you're stuffing so much into this movie in terms of references to other movies. But anyway, other than just that, the buildup of it, I still liked the sequence. And then suddenly we get this like metal music playing during the whole thing, and I thought, I don't know if I would have chosen that, but okay, you know, all right. It's still a horrific, crazy scene worth talking about. But good God. But, you know, all that being said, although that sequence just felt a little off for me, Maybe there was second unit involved, I'm not sure, but the filmmaking didn't, the shot choices and filmmaking didn't quite seem consistent for me. So I'm really not sure if like it wasn't all directed by the same director, because it was such a huge sequence. It's hard for me to say. I don't know. It just felt a little bit off. But once that sequence is over, and again, still a great sequence worth talking about. This the blood version of Carrie, or no, the Carrie puts the blood on everyone else. You know what I mean? And it's Dennis Quaid's only scene of not being over the top, because he's just so frozen with paralysis, with horror. You know what I mean? I just great stuff. But all of that being said, once the sequence is over, the movie goes back to its traditional film language, and it's just that sad tragedy where she's limping away from the studio on the street, and then she falls over and literally bursts apart. And then they do the thing again where just the head comes off. And it's the Demi Moore head, and it, like a little starfish, starts moving. I'm like, oh, it's the thing again. It's so creepy, you know. But the beautiful circle of the movie, her head goes back to the star, and her starfish head perfectly lines up with the star, and then she dissolves. And that image I didn't want to say for the spoilers earlier, literally that great opening sequence, which it almost goes on too long, but to me that's what real cinema is. It should be pushed. It should go almost too long. I think while Night Bitch is perfectly cut, I think it's perfectly valid and fair for movies to also do the opposite, and to sometimes let something go on a little too long, because it's there for a reason. And then when it goes on for a little bit too long, that's also a metaphor for what she does. What she does to herself goes on for too long. You know, like she does it to herself for too long. That's part of the message of the movie. But the very last image of that montage of just the star being made and then being cracked is the very last image, is a hamburger gets dropped onto the star and ketchup's all over the place, and the guy luckily is nice enough to pick it up and clean it up to whatever extent he can, but there's still a huge ketchup covering everything but Eliza. And perhaps symbolically, she just calls herself Sue when she's Margaret Qualley. You know, she's just a fraction of herself. Yes, the best part of you is this fraction of yourself, your attractive youth. That's not really fair, you know what I mean? That's just the most marketable part of yourself to a bunch of bridge trolls. But that's the sad thing, is that she essentially hamburgers herself. That's the symbol of the whole movie. You've hamburgered yourself. You've turned yourself into a cheap food product for the sake of the pleasure of a bunch of bridge trolls and their little clone dwarf army of money men. And that's not fair to you. That's not right for you to do yourself. You should have never done that to yourself. And that's what the tragedy of this movie is. So those are my thoughts. It was so sad when she just dissolves into blood, and it looks almost identical to the ketchup at the beginning. But it was so sad, because the truth is, we're all going to live and die. But it is the journey that matters, and what matters in that journey is to appreciate yourself. I wish she had just gone to that date. You know what I mean? She might have actually had a good time. As much as that dude was a dork, he was a fan, and he valued her as she looked in the present. He didn't say, oh, I wish you looked like a young... No, he valued her as she looked in the present. And she, even if it didn't work out with him, you know, that's not really the most important thing. She just would have had a chance to be around someone that valued her as she is, and whether or not she ever saw him again after that date, could at least have the knowledge of knowing, hey, there's people out there who are going to appreciate me for me, and maybe that's who I should be spending my time with. If I'm not a star anymore, okay, but maybe I should value myself and spend my time with people who just like me for me, and not because of my beautiful 20-year-old ass. You know what I mean? I mean, is it really that beautiful? I mean, we're not that clean in our 20s. We're pretty gross in our 20s. You know what I mean? The guys she's spending time with as Margaret Qualley are just superficial guys, young guys themselves who are all idiots. So is that really the quality time that you miss so much? Was just the time when you could be vain as the rest of the world? You know, that's something to ask. And I think that's the best part about this movie is it's something to ask yourself what's important to you. So, yeah. So I'm opening to discussion. Do you want to talk about the ending? If you want, how did you feel about the ending? Please leave your thoughts in the comments. But don't forget, if you are talking about the ending, especially the last 30 minutes, please put spoiler at the top of your comments. So if anyone else reads the comments, they'll know it's a spoiler. And if they haven't seen the movie, they can wait and watch the movie first. Because I think the best way to watch this movie is with an open mind and your own mind doing its own thinking. Don't just let me do the thinking for you and, you know, for some fucking essay for your professor or some shit like that. But really think for yourself and what do you take from the movie? How does it reflect your life in your own personal way? Because ultimately that's all how we look at things anyway. And there's no reason to just take someone else's thought for your own because you're not secure enough with your own mind. Think for yourself. Feel what you feel. And I'd love to know if you have a different thought or if you thought the ending was perfect and I'm an idiot, and that's fine. You know, I am an idiot. I'm a total ninny. As I told my roommate, who's also my best friend for 17 years, she used to call me a ninny when we were younger, and I took it so personally. I really felt like she was calling me dumb. But then there was a brief period where we weren't talking to each other, and I realized that I am a ninny. I'm 100% a ninny and a dumbass. Maybe the only smart part of me is how I analyze pictures. But other than that, I'm in real life just a nerd who is a bit of a dork and a weirdo myself. So once I realized that, I was much happier with myself because I wasn't telling myself that I'm some young, cool dude who girls should like. No, I mean, I hope they like me. But really, I'm just a dork. I'm just a ninny. And it's perfectly fine to be a ninny. As long as you know you're a ninny, you can orient your choices to fit recognizing what you are. So, yeah. The hats off to the substance. Great picture. Yeah. So, hats off to the substance. Really great picture. Great job. Demi Moore, wonderful job. Margaret Qualley, great job. Cinematography of Margaret Qualley's body, beautiful. So yeah, I'm just a gross old man too. But I'm just a guy. This is what we are as men. We are, and actually, this is what it is to be human. You know, we all try to pretend that we're somehow better than other people or that somehow we have more morals than anybody else. But the truth is, we're just horny, hungry creatures. And you know what I mean? We're all looking at other people and checking their bodies out and comparing ourselves to them. We're all doing it. And I think that's the great part of all the movies I've talked about, whether it's Night Bitch or this movie. All the movies I've talked about in this part 1 and part 2 is that it's about us as people and how we look at the world and how we look at ourselves. And the truth is that we're a little bit grotesque, and just to become okay with the parts that, you know, it's fine, it's okay, as long as you're being honest and you're not being like I said, that guy, Dennis Quaid's character, is a bridge troll. He is a monster. He's a dishonest monster. And Demi Moore only became a monster because she was dishonest and took the substance. But if we could just be honest with ourselves and be who we are and not try to take advantage of other people, then we can be the best of ourselves, or at least enjoy ourselves as people. So that's what I have to say on The Substance. Great film. Thank you. Hats off to the filmmakers. I thought both movies noteworthy. I think I enjoyed Night Bitch a bit more for its domestic relatability. But I can't deny The Substance as one insane piece of film. that deserves to be watched and to be considered, and it has a meaning. It's overwhelmingly has meaning, and is worth talking about. So thank you very much. The hype is real, and catch you next time.